When people look back at my generation, if they do, I think they will recognize Thomas Pynchon as the foremost author of fiction. He's a difficult writer, beloved by the professors who translate him for roomfuls of puzzled students. He will be our Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Faulkner. Believing this to be true, I regret that I have had so little contact with him. Many years ago, I made an attempt to read The Crying of Lot 49. It was short. I thought I could handle it. I remember being put off by it for some reason. But among people I respected then, there was a wild surge for Pynchon. He was as big a rage as a literary person could be. So I found myself dutifully plowing through V, a very celebrated book. And again, it wasn't working for me. The very features of the book that so attracted others, its strangeness, its convoluted mysteries, the goofy names for the characters, were all too much or too little for me. What he was doing was impressive, I could see that much, but it did not appeal to me. So when Gravity's Rainbow came along, obviously longer and reportedly even more dense with obfuscation and significance, and with his ardent admirers practically genuflecting before it, I took a pass, as well as with all the books that followed. I felt delinquent about this. I'd heard of his latest book, set in the 60s, in a drug-soaked, sun-bleached Southern California, where ambition for many boiled down to getting high, getting laid, and catching a good wave. This is familiar turf for Pynchon, his old stomping grounds. He's written about it before. He was there with his old pal, Richard Farina. Maybe this new book would be more accessible. Even though I don't read fiction anymore, I felt I should give him one last try, thinking it was me who was deficient. While I recall almost nothing about The Crying of Lot 49 and V, I feel that this book that I did read, Inherent Vice, is exactly like them. The story is different, but the storytelling is the same. The book is a primer for clods like me on what the author is trying to do. He even explains what the title means. Well, I could take a shot at that. Inherent vice, like original sin. In the insurance racket, a hidden defect. We are flawed, and whatever we try to do is going to turn out badly. Most of what we are busy doing is chasing our tails. We have met the enemy, and they is us. Pynchon uses the standard SoCal detective story a la Chandler and Ross MacDonald to his own ends, steeping it in drugs, limiting himself to a stoner hippie vocabulary and mentality, and writing decisively nevertheless, tossing off evocative metaphors, humorous references, and long fluttering sentences that are difficult to wrap your mind around. The book has, for me, an Alice in Wonderland quality to it. Suggestively named characters, they're like mugs and dolls out of Dick Tracy, pop up in profusion like flowers in a hothouse, intertwining in odd ways. Instead of the Cheshire Cat and the Mad Hatter, we are given loan sharks, cops, musicians, FBI agents, and dentists, all of whom are more than they appear to be, and none of whom ever seem quite real. It all feels like a big joke, and for me, it gets tiresome. There's a winding, twisting narrative you could call a plot. I won't summarize it because it would be tedious and an exercise in silliness. You sense that it is not about solving the mystery, it's about seeing the mystery widen and deepen, expand, transform, like a vapor. The protagonist is a man who, when given the opportunity to question anyone, even a Ouija board or a nascent computer network, will say, "Does it know where we can score?" He lives in a world where the flower child dream of peace and love has been steamrollered flat by developers and splattered by Charlie Manson. The faithless, money-driven world, the author calls it, the thick and sorrowful catalog of human desire. The protagonist is confused and hazy. As a reader, I couldn't keep everything straight either. So he'd be forgetting stuff, and so would I. We'd have a combination unreliable narrator and reader, and so forth, as the author would say. The complicated book reminds me of a building with colorful stained glass windows and gargoyles. Those are its characters, and wait, that would make it a church, right? But it seems to be run by CPAs who are dressed like monks who are, what? Or here's another analogy that comes to mind when reading this writer. His work is like those carvings of the balls or boxes, with the balls or boxes inside one another, and so forth. All elaborately decorated, insanely intricate work. It's like one of those Persian carpets made of knots, thousands of knots per square inch, unaccountably creating an astonishing pattern, a tapestry, all tied up from loose ends. It would unravel at a touch. As it should, the book ends with the dopey detective driving in a fog. The author writes, "He was in a convoy of unknown size, each car keeping the one ahead in taillight range, like a caravan in a desert of perception, gathered for a while for safety in getting across a patch of blindness." A number of possible, or he would say plausible, outcomes are considered for when the fog will lift, including the fog never lifting. And the last one ends the book. For the fog to burn away, and for something else this time, somehow, to be there instead. It's like reality never satisfied this man. The people in charge of it really came up short. He feels cheated. He wanted more. And that's a natural invitation for a fiction writer, who can spin out conspiracies, paranoia, delusions, illusions, for why it all went so wrong. I share his dismay, that's for sure. His reaction is a wild ride that, I want to say, runs out of gas, but it isn't that so much as the more the ride goes on, the more I wanted to get off.